I need to practice mine a little bit. This is great. I'm so excited about you. Keep doing this. Okay, yeah, go practice. Ready? Let's gather them in.
We should get started. If everybody can get back in their seats, please.
I just was telling them about some resources, Joneen. Can I start with that while they're still settling in?
Hi guys, I just can't get enough of you, sorry. I wanted to tell you about a couple resources that I was talking to people in the hallway about. One is I'm doing this website with my colleague Carlo Viallo about school practice. PTs, OTs, and SLPs called Seek Freaks. I put a bunch of cards around. Check it out. See what you think. In North Carolina, I have a PT website that has a lot of resources on it, so that's on my business card. If you're interested in that, come get a business card from me, and you can check that out. And also, the special interest group, the school special interest group, has now made all of our fact sheets public domain. So anyone who's not a member can come get some of our resources, and we've done a lot of great work with autism recently. We have a fact sheet on APE and PT, what's different, what's the same, and lots of other things to check out. So go to the Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapy and check out the fact sheets.
Thank you, Lori. We really appreciate your presentation this morning. All right, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Joneen Lowman, and she's going to be speaking on the use of telepractice to deliver therapy services. And Dr. Lowman is assistant professor here at the University of Kentucky in the Division of Communication Sciences and Disorders. She teaches graduate courses in assessment and treatment of language and speech, sound disorders, and school-aged children. And she's also responsible for the clinical rotations of the students. What's really exciting is she received a grant this past year, and she's the principal investigator on linking kids to speech-language pathologists. It's called LINKS. And this is a personal preparation grant that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education to train CD students, graduate CD students, in the effective use of telepractice. And she's also on our Prepare grant and supervises and mentors the speech and language pathologists. So join me in welcoming Dr. Lowman.
Okay, so let's see. Does that work? Yes, no, I think I need to be a little higher, don't I? How's that? Yeah, that sounds good. It sounds good to myself. All right, so I'm very excited to be here. As Colleen said, my name is Joneen Lowman. You can remember that because my father is John, my mother is Noreen, and they put it together and got Joneen. Okay, so maybe that'll help you for that. Today I'm going to talk about telepractice. We're going to first start our discussion with a broad overview of what telepractice is. Then we're going to talk about some knowledge and skills you would need if you're going to engage in telepractice or even kind of thinking about it. What should you be thinking through? And then if time permits, we will talk about some things that are happening here within the College of Health Sciences related to the use of telepractice for that. Now, as we go through our conversation, it'll allow us to achieve 3 learning outcomes. First one is by the time we leave this morning, I'd like for you to be able to talk about what telepractice is and is not. Then from there, feel comfortable in the knowledge and skills you need in order to engage in telepractice. And then third, through the discussion of points 1 and 2, be able to self-reflect on what do I need to update as a practitioner if I want to engage in telepractice. What skill sets do I need to acquire? Okay, so we are going to start our discussion out with a quick survey. So let me talk first about what we're going to do, and then I'll let you start doing it, okay? So we're going to use an online response system called Kahoot. And so I have the website. So you need your phones. This is one time a professor will say, get out a phone, okay? I want you to use it for that. You're going to go to Kahoot. IT, it, okay? And so I've given you that up there. We're doing pretty okay. It will ask you for a PIN number. You're going to have to wait for a second because I've got to close down my PowerPoint, open that, and start the game so you can get the PIN number. Okay, so as long as you're to the page where it says enter PIN, you're good to go. Okay, let me tell you what's going to happen from there before I close this down. You'll have a PIN number, you'll put it in. Then it'll ask you to put in your name or your initials. I don't care, real name, fake name, whatever, but you're going to have to put something in there. Then what it'll do is it'll give you a question. It gives you a second or two to process the question. Then it takes you to a page where it still has the question and 4 responses, 4 options. On your phone, it'll just be 4 different colors, like red, blue, green, and yellow. You select the color that corresponds with your choice. Does that make sense so far? Okay, for it. Now then, here is what we're going to all agree upon. We are using technology. Technology has a mind of its own. Yes? I have used Kahoot with groups in my classes of up to 35. I've never tried it with 100 plus of what happens when you flood the system with 100 plus. But I won't know until I try, right? So we are going to try for that. So just keep that in mind. I've also never tried it in the basement of a building. Okay? And so if you're going to do telepractice, guys, this is lesson number 1. You plan, you check, you test. I came down here and tested it. I've used it. But then technology has a life of its own, and it can do whatever it wants. So do we all agree with that? Are we okay? All right, so let me shut down my slide and pull it up so you can get the pen. So there's your pen. Then you'll need to put in a name or initials or something. Here we go. So far, so good. Everybody's getting in. I'm going to let a couple more players get in because I know we have around 100 people here with us. So. We're going to go ahead and start. We have 5 questions. You'll answer one, then we'll talk about it, then you'll answer another, we'll talk about it. Okay, so here we go. First question. So your answers are either yes, no, or no clue, and you just select on the color. All right, so 70 of us said yes, 7 said no, and 18 said I have no clue. Okay, so point number 1 is they're all the same. It's just variety of nomenclature based on the profession that you're with. Medicine, we'll call it e-health. So like doctors, if you're doing more of medical hospital type care, they'll call it telemed. If you're talking about rehab in general, like PT and OT like to call it telerehab, telerehabilitation. In speech path, ASHA, our governing body, has adopted the term telepractice. So it just kind of more or less depends on the organization that you're communicating with. For today, I'm going to call it telerehabilitation because I feel like that best represents OT, PT, and ST. You might hear me slip in and say telepractice. If I do, it's the same thing. It's just I'm so used to saying telepractice because I am a speech-language pathologist that it has become habituated. Does that make sense? But first thing you learn is a variety of terms referring to the same thing. All right, so let's look at our next question. So there's the general question, then I'll give you the options. So 32 said yes, 56 said no, and 5 said no clue. Well, if you said no, you're correct. So telerehabilitation is not an intervention strategy. It is a service delivery model. And that definition holds true whether you're OT, PT, ST. It's just another way of delivering services, just like if you did inclusion, or if you did small group, or one-on-one, or transdisciplinary. It's just a way of delivering services. Okay, here's our third question. So 8 people said yes, 83 said no, and 3 said I don't know. Well, if you said no, you were correct. It can involve some high-tech software and hardware, but it doesn't have to. And so today as I'm talking, I'll talk about some hardware you'd want to look at, some software, some peripheral devices, etc., so you kind of have an idea of what you'd be looking at. But it doesn't require expensive technology. What's more important is your knowledge of how to use technology. And what goes into that is more important than the actual hardware itself. And so we'll talk later about knowing things like cookies and bandwidth management and encryption and firewalls. That's more important than the hardware and the software because that's what will let you use it. All right, so let's look at another one here. So 4 said strongly agree, 12 said agree, 50 said disagree, and 25 said strongly disagree for that. So yay for our 75 that disagreed and strongly disagreed. Does not. It does. You need training. Just because you have clinical practice does not mean you are skilled and ready to go engage in telepractice. And this is going to be one of those things I'll rant about, because I follow a lot of Facebook blogs with SLPs and telepractice, and it scares me to death because people will say, oh, I want to make some side money. I'm going to get a computer and do telepractice. And I'm like, because there are a lot of skill sets you need, because it is very, very different than face-to-face. There are things that are very similar with in-person, but there's a lot of skills you need that are different. Like, you need to know what encryption is. You need to know what cookies are. You need to know if your internet is not working, how are you going to fix it for that. You need to know how you're going to engage that child that's using assistive technology when it's all on the computer. So there is some training that is required for it. All right, and our last one. If a few people make that decision, if nothing else, check, I don't know. If you're just like, oh. Okay, so 22 said that it's not appropriate, 54 disagreed, and 14 said, I just don't know. Willie can be very appropriate even for children that require physical manipulation. I put this one up for my OTs and PTs because I've had a lot who says, well, I need to touch them. And I'll say, well, I don't think you do. You know, we can have a way around that. And sometimes, as we will talk today, you will learn it's like any service delivery model. There's a continuum. And you know, for certain things, we would not role release. Because what Lori was saying, well, if I can't even keep them upright as a PT, how is that paraprofessional going to do it? So there can be a time and a place for it. But I would say for most kiddos that we work with, we could use telepractice. You know, it's just a different way of looking at that. So don't let that idea of I need to be able to touch them, whether it's for feeding, whether it's for swallowing, if you're ST, if it's apraxia, whether you're PT and OT and need some of that, say, well, I can't use telepractice because that's not supported by the literature for that. So let me close this down, and then let me pull my slide back up, and we'll give kind of a formal definition then for what telepractice is. So telerehabilitation is basically the use of telecommunications to connect a service provider with a child. And so that telecommunications can either be something as simple as a telephone, it could be email, it could be video conferencing, kind of like your FaceTime, Skype, and it could be up to some high-tech software and hardware that we have for that. But it's basically using technology to transverse that gap. Telerehabilitation is endorsed by the professional organizations for OT, PT, and ST. So all three of our professional organizations endorse it and recognize its use. And as we talked about earlier, I want to go ahead and get the idea that it's a service delivery model. It is not a specific type of intervention strategy. So telerehabilitation can be delivered one of three ways. It can either be synchronous, it can be asynchronous, or a hybrid. So I'm going to start with synchronous. I'm going to start by showing you two examples of what that would look like. The first example is going to be of speech therapy. And that's going to be conducted with a little boy who's in his home getting articulation therapy. The two service providers are two students that we have in our LINKS program. So they are getting systematic and explicit training in the use of telepractice. So that's the first one you're going to see. My second one will be of OT and doing some handwriting skills with the girl. And then I'll talk about synchronous.
Next. Okay, so we did that, right? check that off. Next, what are the 4 things we have to do when we make our R sound?
Fat.
What's fat?
Or tongue.
So what does that mean? Do you know what that means?
So it had to put it wide.
Good. Good. So,
find your first match. Circle it.
Hold on, it's going to be easy. I see it. Yeah, I know what you're doing.
Ooh.
ATEX
They want you to
is
say
a truck. Wait.
Tyrannosaurus
A
Rex.
His mom's in the background.
Rex.
Hmm.
good.
What's the other one called? This one? Yeah, triceratops go together because they are both dinosaurs.
Can you tell what he's working on? Okay. So first thing I want you to see is we're using a software program called Zoom that allows for interaction between my 2 clinicians, which are on the side, the top and the bottom, and then the little boys in the middle. This particular piece of software allows us to see the client, they can see us, and then it allows for interaction. So we're able to put things up on the screen. The child could circle it, the child could highlight. With this particular program, they could even write in text. So it mimics in person. So synchronous delivery kind of mimics in person. It's like the child is right across from me, or the family if I'm doing like birth to 3 and I'm interacting and coaching with them, or right across, it's just we're doing it via the computer for that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to go pull up my OT. It is coming from a website, a company called Presence Learning. I am not endorsing them or anything. I'm just giving them credit that that's where I'm pulling this from, okay? And they do deliver. They are a private company that delivers OT, PT, and behavioral health via online. But we're going to watch one of their short clips on OT, okay?
Just take your time. It gives your thumb a real nice workout. Is it hard?
Yeah.
Can you feel your thumb getting a good workout?
Yeah.
Good. Oh, you're almost there. Good job. Nice job.
All right. So that was an example from OT. Now, I'm not here debating whether you should have done that or not. Okay, I have no clue. So when I chose it, if y'all are going, why did she choose that? That is so inappropriate, Lori Ray. If that was highly inappropriate, it's showing synchronous, okay? That was the purpose here, is this idea that what you would do in person, so let's say you would do that, could still be done online, and I didn't have to touch them to do that. All right, let me close this down and go back. Okay, so synchronous, again, mimics what's in person. Now then, I'm going to show you a couple other examples. We're not going to have video. I'm just going to talk about them to show you the range. And these are going to be more medical focused, okay, here that we're doing at UK Health. But I just want you to see the range of what can be done. In this example, this is the Blue Angels High Risk OBGYN program. So what we have going on here is we have a doctor, a pediatric specialist here at UK, who then has an ultrasound tech who's out in rural Kentucky. That ultrasound tech has been trained to use Telepractice and to use the ultrasound. If you look in the bottom left, that big black case, that's the ultrasound and the Telepractice equipment. So that is specialized equipment that was built for this. The tech has that, and you kind of see it on the stand in the top left, or top right corner there. It's on the stand. They run the ultrasound. The doctor can see all the results live as they're coming in. The doctor can talk to the mother who was there, the mother can see the doctor, and they can have this two-way conversation. And this is a way that we can get out into rural, particularly Appalachia, where we have very high-risk pregnancies. So I brought this up to show you we can do pretty much anything. You just might have to think outside of the box for it. Let me give you another example. This is emergency medicine. So the doctor in the blue shirt is here at UK, and then he is online with a doctor at an ER in another hospital, a satellite hospital here in Kentucky, and then they're talking back and forth different cases that are coming in. That emergency doctor in a rural area may not have knowledge to deal with, or may not have the skill set and needs a second opinion. And so they're available. This is kind of like the hallmark and the pride of UK, because it started UK telehealth here, really, was the memory disorder clinic with Dr. Jaka. There was a real need for families out in rural that were dealing with loved ones who are developing memory loss, Alzheimer's, etc., and there was nobody out there to assess them. Your general practitioners really didn't have the knowledge and skills specific to that area. And so we had a neurologist here who has a real heart for that. And so one day a week he runs a memory clinic, and he does diagnostics with different families at satellite campuses that UK has and area rural health centers that UK has. The family comes there, and then he is here at UK. They speak. There you see him. He's in the white coat here. The family is on the other end, and so there's a woman at the top that he's assessing with some balance. And he does his interview. There's somebody there that if there needs to be any physical things done, there's a nurse practitioner that can assist with that. And then he can start making some recommendations, making a diagnosis. And then he also communicates with that general PT when it comes to what meds could be recommended and putting that together, what health. And then there's a second follow-up to this, that there is a support group that's offered via Telepractice. So I bring these up not because they're related specific to us, and I know they're more adult focused, but I just want you to see what we can do. So I want you to get the idea of pretty much anything is possible. And as technology is advancing, I'm pretty much going to say we could do anything, you know, as it's progressing. So synchronous, it's live. The second way we can deliver it is asynchronously. So I said there's three ways. So asynchronously means I and the client are not communicating simultaneously at the same time. We also call it store and forward. So some examples of that would be like emails. You know, you send me an email description of the child's day, let's say as an SLP, and I'm trying to figure out why they're biting, what communicative function that serves. And then I read your report back, and then I start interpreting it. Another one for PT or OT might be, let's say you're trying to get some data on their ability to walk, stand, pull the stand, grasp, whatever. So you have the person on the other end video for you, and then they send you the video, you evaluate it, and you make your recommendations based on that. For ST, I could do something similar where they collect a language sample for me. Let's say I'm doing some early intervention. The parent records a language sample as they're interacting with their child, videos it, sends it to me, and then I do the evaluation and write off of that. So that would be an example of asynchronous for that. We also call it store and forward, because you store it, you send it to me, then I store it and send it back. Okay. The third way this can be done is a blending of the two, and that would be a hybrid approach, where you use a little bit of store and forward, and then you also use some synchronous. So an example within SLP could be I administer a test because I'm going to do an initial evaluation, and so I give a language test. I then have the person on the other end who's assisting me collect a language sample for me at a separate time. They send that to me. I take that with my test results, I analyze it, and I write up my report. Part of the assessment I did online with the child, the other part they collected and then sent to me. Australia. In Australia, they use telepractice very heavily, and there's a lot of really nice literature coming out of Australia. And I'll give you an adult example. What they do there with their patients that have had a stroke and have aphasia is they will do therapy synchronously with that client 1 week, and then on the alternating week, they've assigned some homework for them to do, some practice exercises. The client records it, stores it and sends it to that therapist. She analyzes it, which then helps her get ready for the following week. And so they use this alternating system of synchronous, asynchronous, okay, for that. So 3 ways that we can connect with our clients: synchronously, asynchronous, or a hybrid for that. All right, is telerehabilitation effective? And yes, it is. While we don't have a real deep body of literature to support its use, because it's not that technology is new, it's just become to the point where now it's available to everyone. You know, it used to be, I'm going to tell you my age. Do you remember those punch cards where you had the long cards? How many? You don't have to raise your hand, but I'll raise mine. And it was long when it was a 9 system. Okay, those of you that are really young, computers used to be binary, and it was either was or was not, and it'd be a string up to 9. Okay, and you put your card in, it would read the punches, and then that's how it would process data. We even had these things called floppy disks. You know, they weren't even round and hard. You could shake them in the air like this, and that's what your data was on, okay? So it used to be, you know, even when I say used to be, even 5 years ago, where you just didn't have access to the technology like we do. Not only just the hardware, like our iPhones and everything, but just even the internet connection, you know, for that. So there is research, and it's being investigated more. But in speech path, I've just listed several things, like articulation disorders. In fact, a study by Grogan, Johnson, and colleagues found that children that received articulation therapy via telepractice made greater gains than when it was in person. Autism, there's a lot of research done with the treatment of that population, both in education, medicine, and in speech and language, supporting its effectiveness. Dysarthria, I know for those of you in ST, you say, well, Joneen, kids don't have dysarthria. They have apraxia, but not dysarthria. But what a dysarthria does for me is some of the studies I've seen with dysarthria, I can go, oh, that's how they assess this motor skill. So if that works like this, then let me see, and I extrapolate it to my kids. And I go, let me try it like this, okay, for that. Fluency, language and cognition, dysphagia, that's another one, even for my OT, because I know we have some role release there, OT and ST doing feeding and swallowing. There's some nice research out there about being able to do feeding with it. Real nice study with some kiddos too. In fact, the study, the Hill study that's up there, what they did, I thought this was cool. It was a family, it was a case study, and the family was in the United Kingdom. So when I say UK, I don't mean Kentucky, okay? I mean UK, okay? And the providers were at the University of Massachusetts General Hospital. At the UK, they had maxed out service providers they could find who could help their child with feeding and swallowing. They had heard about this group who specialized. The mom reached out, and they said, we'll give it a try. And so they did a case study. What they found from that is the child's tolerance for food increased. It increased from about 3 things he would tolerate up to about 7 or 8. And this is over a course of about 2 months or so. His toleration increased, regurgitation decreased. I don't do, I mean, I know about swallowing, but I do language. Okay, so help me out here. His ability to retain, you know, and not expel it, and actually digest, whatever the fancy word is for that. Okay, don't hate me, UST, but I do language. Okay, and I eat cake, and that's kind of where I stay. Okay, I love cake. For that. So voice disorders, so I want you to realize we can do a lot of things. For PT, cardiopulmonary, I know that's more like you might think adults, but we have a lot of kiddos that are coming in with heart issues for that. Stability, chronic pain management, low back pain, preventing pressure sores and pressure relieving activities. Maybe that would work for yours, Lori, and our other kid, Mika, you know, changing. Improved physical function and proximal humerus fractures for the treatment of that. And then within OT, seating and wheeled mobility, improved handwriting, complex feeding, prosthetic fitting. That was really cool. You know, when I was reading that study, and that was done with children and getting better fits, early intervention, and then home safety intervention. So I want you to realize there is research out there saying that this does work. So with that said, kind of like, why would we even want to be talking about telerehabilitation, and then why here in Kentucky? So I'm just going to give you some reasons why. First of all, in Kentucky, about 13% of kids in grades K to 12 receive special education services.
So about 13% of K-12 population is in special ed for that. About 47% of children attending our preschool programs qualify for special ed. Now, if I move over to my pie graph there, that's the 13% of K-12 who are in special ed. You'll notice that a little bit more than 25% of them have speech and language as their primary disability category. Primary. And then OPT and PT could come in down with orthopedic and some of our others. I would say for all three of our professions, that number is actually higher. I would say for speech path, we see more than 25% of the kids with disabilities because this only reflects primary. It doesn't address all those kids that you're also seeing as a related service. For OT and PT, I would say that your skills are actually needed more than what's reflected, but we know that in Kentucky, like other states, they put some real stringent guidelines on who can qualify and who can't. It doesn't mean that they can't benefit. So first I want you to see a lot of our kids need our three services, and we are touching them. Second, there is a shortage of our profession in the schools. There's just not enough of us, particularly for schools in rural areas. They are particularly vulnerable to these shortages for that. And what compounds that is 62.3% of children in Kentucky attend rural or town schools. So about 2/3 of our kids are in rural areas where they do not have providers or don't have a sufficient number of providers. So they aren't getting access to services. And then to compound it, about 25% of kids in Kentucky live in poverty. And we just know from the very deep and rich literature on poverty how it affects development in all areas and post-secondary outcomes. So why telerehab? Well, 13% of our kids are going to receive our services and need them. Most of those kids are in rural areas where they don't have access to OT, PT, ST for that. And then we compound it with poverty. To make matters worse, here are some projected growths by 2024. If you think about that, that's really only 7 years from now. So physical therapy in Kentucky, we're looking at a 35% increase, occupational therapy 26%, and in speech path 24%. So you take this rising need, that includes new jobs and replacing retirements. So that's new jobs too, new needs. You say that we already have shortages in rural areas, but most of our kids in rural areas, how are we going to meet their needs? As Lori said earlier, we are required under the law to provide services, and we can't just say, well, they plateaued. So, services are no longer being provided because we can't do that. We also can't say, well, there's not a service provider available. That's not going to cut it. You're out of compliance. So we can use telerehabilitation as one way to start addressing some of these shortages and getting out to those areas. We also, my final 2 points about this is we're seeing a change in the way the reimbursement system is being written. Now when we're looking at payers, and that's Medicaid, and how many of you bill Medicaid for services? Yeah, many of us rely on that, or our school, or whoever relies on that. They are now going to a value-based, outcome-oriented payment system. So they are saying, we will pay you this lump sum, and to continue to receive that amount, then your patient at the end, your child, needs to be X, Y, and Z. They need to be back to work, they need to be functioning in school, etc. And they're saying, we're going to give you this lump sum, but this is what you better be able to achieve if you want to continue to get reimbursed. So we're seeing a change that it's now not going to be so much service by service, hour by hour, but more of at the end, we want somebody that has made significant life outcomes, and that's how you're going to be paid. And then finally is also, because of telerehabilitation, we can get our clients more access to specialists. So I'm going to always talk to ST. I've already showed you one area that if I worked in a rural school and I had a child that had feeding and dysphagia issues, I would need help with. Because, particularly now, I've had the luxury of specializing in language, for that. Via telerehabilitation, because I could consult with somebody, now I can get the knowledge and skills I need in order to work with that client effectively. Hearing impairment is another big one we're struggling with right now here in Kentucky. Kids in rural areas who are getting cochlear implants, they're going back to Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, it's too far to come back to get remapped and to get the specialization they need to develop speech and language. But there's not enough practitioners out in the communities, and those who are there don't always have specialization in how do you deal with a child that's starting to develop speech and language because of an implant. But because of telerehabilitation, we can connect them with our specialists here, and they can get that training, that modeling, that we can interact with them there. So we see that there's research to support it, and there is a need for it. So you say, okay, you've kind of got me some buy-in, or at least think about it or be aware of it. So what are some of the things you need to consider? So I'm going to talk about 7 kind of nuts and bolts. Okay, so I've listed those there for you, and I'm going to talk about each one of some things that you need to be thinking about. So I'm going to first start with why telerehabilitation. And I think this is the most important one, is you first need to work out in your head, why would this be the best service delivery model for you and for your clients, for your kids? Whether it's in the schools, elementary, middle, high, whether it's for EI, what is this going to achieve? So what do you want to accomplish? So for example, back to my hearing impaired kids, we are working right now with our ENT department here at Kentucky. Matt Bush, Dr. Matt Bush, is known in the state for cochlear implantation. And so what they'll see is they'll get these kids implanted, they get initial mapping done, they send them back, and then families are not making appointments because they just can't get back for services. Some of the families are driving 2 and 3 hours, for a 1-hour session. And so they're getting a lot of cancellation rates, and kids are not getting the services they need. So he came to us, because we're looking at telerehabilitation, and said, hey, what if we work together? Because we provide speech and language services. They have access to the kiddos who aren't getting it. What if we come together? So for us, that first question was, it'll allow us to accomplish and meet the needs of a group that we otherwise can't. Second, where's the most appropriate place for service? You need to be asking yourself that. Is it something that simply they have to be here in person, in an office, with this equipment for it to happen, or could we do it back in the natural environment, the school setting? Even if you're in a rural school, some of the schools have school health centers, where there is a nurse there and they could be brought in, okay, school-based health centers. Is the service appropriate via the technology? I've got to ask myself that. Most of them I'd say yes, it is. What expertise and support do you need on the child's side? You are always, when we're dealing with kiddos, you're going to always have an adult there. In schools, in the literature, you'll hear that referred to as an e-helper. Okay, sometimes you'll hear them referred to as a telepresenter, a telefacilitator, could be a nurse practitioner. In the schools, it's typically a paraprofessional. When you look at early intervention, it's typically going to be the parent, and that would make sense, right? Because you're working with the parent. That's the job of EIs, to coach that parent. So I have to ask myself, what does the child need on their end for this to be successful? And then what expertise and support do you need on your side? If you're thinking, I can't consistently do FaceTime, I would say you might not want to do this yet, okay? You need some support, okay? So you need to think, what do I have on my end? What sort of IT support do I have? What people here that can help problem solve for me? Who could do some of the purchasing if we need to keep the technology up to date? What do I have on my end that's going to help make this successful? And then the last one is, what is the financial justification? And my last one is there because that's reality, right? We'd love to get services to everybody, and I totally agree with that, but then it comes down to how are you going to pay for it? So you also have to take a look at how are you going to be able to pay for this sort of model. So those are some questions I'd say you need to start figuring out and answering before you even think about doing telepractice. So you know in your head why you're getting into this. What is the reason? What is it going to accomplish? Okay, second thing is licensure law. In a nutshell, you have to be licensed in the state in which you live in and the state in which the child lives in order to provide telerehabilitation services. So if you are on one of the contiguous states to Kentucky and you see a child in Missouri or West Virginia or Ohio or Tennessee, you are going to have to be licensed, OT, PT, ST, I don't care who you are, you have to be licensed in both states. Okay, so that's one thing you need to think about if you're going to cross state lines, which that's a big push for telerehabilitation, is being able to cross state lines and go into some school districts like in Montana, California, etc. That's one thing. The second thing is you need to be aware of the guidelines within Kentucky or any state you might go to when it comes to telerehabilitation. Each of our licensure laws have some very specific skills, knowledge, skills, policies you need, and it is outlined there. For example, in ST, this is only in the ST licensure law, it says that our first initial contact with a client must be done through a healthcare provider. So that means if I've never met a child, I can't just have a family go, hey, I've heard about your services, I'd like for you to evaluate my child, and I pick them up that way. It's going to have to come through a nurse, it has to come through another SLP, it would have to come through EI, then I can make a contact. But I can't just go out and make initial contact on my own. That's an ST. That's not an OTPT. You have different guidelines for that. So you need to be knowledgeable. In speech-language pathology, right now 21 states have specific policies and procedures and regulations in their licensure law. So that means other states don't, okay? Do not, though, plead ignorance. Please don't say, you know, I looked in this state's licensure law, doesn't say anything about telepractice, so I went ahead and did it. I would say, no, contact the licensure board first. Yeah, and figure out what they know that you don't know, okay, to cover yourself and then save that email. Right now, we don't have matriculation of licenses across the state, so you will have to have a license in every state. This also applies if, let's say, you're going to do therapy. Let's say you do EI intervention, and a family is going to go visit the grandparents, and the mom is going to stay there for a month with her child and says, can you just continue to see me using video conferencing? I would say stop. Do not agree to that. Because some states will say, as soon as you come here and start staying in our state, we view you now as a residence. You now have become a residence, and particularly with that month period. And therefore, you're going to have to be licensed in our state in order to provide services. So be very cautious even things about that. And I bring that up because I did get that email. I got that email from a therapist. The child was going to go to Ohio for a month, and the mom wanted to just Skype. And I was like, no, I'm not going to just Skype, and wanted to receive services up there. And I said, you can't do that yet. You got to check their licensure law and make sure that they're not considering them a residence, and therefore you would need to be licensed, okay? So you need to check licensure law, and you need to be willing, if you're going to see clients in other states, to deal with 2, 3, 4 licenses. That's keeping up with CEUs, that's keeping up with continuing ed, that's keeping up with fees, all of that, and being compliant in both. Lori.
I just wanted to say, I just saw legislation in North Carolina, and it might be in Kentucky as well, for PTs having a consortium where our licensure would be, if you're licensed in one state and you're a member of the consortium, you're licensed in that state as well, which might help a lot.
Yes, they are looking in PT. They are moving more to this consortium packed sort of licensure. I would say of the 3 rehabs, that's the most advanced one, looking at PT and getting that pact going. But again, you're still going to have to look at what states are in that pact, you know, within that consortium, and what are the rules for that. So that is afoot. Thank you, but you just need to be aware, because that is not that prolific yet. Okay, so second thing is you want to keep your license, right? You want to keep that intact. Yeah, we've all worked hard, right? Okay, reimbursement. So you got to get paid. So let me talk for a second about reimbursement. This is from a survey done with the American Speech Language Hearing Association. It was conducted with speech language pathologists and audiologists who say, I engage in telepractice. I am using it. And they just said, who pays you for it? And so you'll see some say Medicaid do, some say private, self-pay, state or federal projects do, Department of Ed's, special population agencies, other, and some were uncertain. If you notice, most of them said self-pay, that the client, the family or the client themselves with adults were paying for those services, followed then by departments of education are paying for that. So let me break it down a little further. Medicare will not pay. End of statement, I don't care what state you're in, they do not reimburse for OT, PT, ST. They just do medicine, okay, right now. Medicaid, that varies by your state. That varies by the state in which you're in as to whether they'll reimburse or not. In Kentucky, Kentucky Medicaid will reimburse for our services. However, it has a stipulation to it. You have to be employed by a medical facility or a doctor. And so I've written that up there. If you are self-employed, they will not reimburse for our services. If you are working through a school district and you're employed by them, they will not reimburse for our services. Right now, the way that Medicaid regulation is written is that if you're employed by a doctor or a medical facility, so a hospital, a clinic, something like that, then they will reimburse. We are working on getting that changed. That is a caveat to our current Medicaid regulations for that. Third-party payers, you know, like Aetna, HMO, those, you just have to try. You know, there is no literature out there that says consistently this one will pay in that one. You kind of have to go through, get pre-approval, or put it through and see if they will reimburse. And that's kind of hit or miss. And from what we're finding, that deals more with who is the reviewer of the case than necessarily the company. So we are finding if you get the right person reviewing it, then they'll approve it because they see it as the same thing as in person. If you get the wrong person, then they'll deny it. So we're kind of seeing that occur. In Kentucky, we have had 2 school districts in Kentucky who have paid for telerehabilitation services. They have used them. They used outside companies from outside of the state, but they did pay for services as a way to address shortages. So we are seeing that departments of ed, school districts, and we've had that happen in Kentucky, will pay for services for that. So yeah, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about funding, but you got to get paid, right? You know, for those of you that are in administration, you got to get paid. It's also one of those areas to think and talk about as you're moving into it. Okay, technology. Okay, what technology do you need? So we're going to Kahoot it. Okay, you ready? We're going to do one more Kahoot, and then we'll talk about some specifics. So it's Kahoot.it. I'm going to close it down and get you a pen.
In there, do we have to get out?
Let's see if it'll let you put a new pen in. That's a good question because I've never done one right after the other. Usually we do it at the beginning of class and go on. We'll see. Let's see. Will it let you put a new pen in? No? Okay, so you have to go out and come back in. But now you're pros. Let's see.
One of my classrooms uses this, and she keeps her data this way, too.
Yes, you can. There are classrooms in the schools that are using it, like you said, collect data this way, yeah. We're losing wires. Turning off your phones. Turn those back on. All right, here we go. Bandwidth refers to
Process of elimination.
is the rate of data transfer is what bandwidth refers to. And data would be those emails that you send, the video that you send and receive. It's the rate of how quickly that transfers. I'll talk about bandwidth in a minute, but I can't begin to do telepractice if I don't know that you can receive my video quickly enough to see me and I can see yours fast enough. So I have to really understand bandwidth and that idea and that concept, even how to determine if a school district or a family's home has sufficient bandwidth, and I can do that. I can go online and determine that if I don't know what I'm looking at. So bandwidth. Let me give you another one here. Okay, so peripheral device, it plugs into a computer, anything that will plug into a computer. It's like a headset, microphone, anything like that. And we'll talk about some peripheral devices in a second you might want to consider if you're using telepractice. All right. The internet is, you laugh, but if I asked you, okay, so the internet is a cable that traverses the globe. I know many of us have started to think it's like the cloud, right, you know, but it actually is a cable. It is a hard cable like this. They lay it under the ocean, and they go through and they'll run new cables so we can start getting more bandwidth. It originally ran east and west. They're now starting to run cables north and south so we can get better bandwidth. But actually, a diver goes out, he lays it, digs it in a trench, lays it into the ocean floor, and that's how you have the internet, and it's transferred through a cable. It is not, for my very young people, it is not the cloud, okay? There's no such thing as that. We just use that to say that it's out there on the cables, okay? But the internet is actually a hardwired cable that runs throughout the world. All right, and here is going to be our last one. All right. Cookies are really small files stored on a computer for that. It's cookies that when you open and you go to MSN, and let's say I sew, and so I've been looking at maybe some sewing websites, that then when I open an MSN, it has all these little advertisements for sewing, okay, for that, okay? Now then, these 4 questions I asked were not because we're going to spend time really talking about them. It's more of to make you aware of the knowledge and skills you need when you start to engage in telepractice, because things like cookies can prevent and let hackers in, you know, for that. They can interfere with firewalls. So I just kind of brought these up as we're starting to talk about technology as to some of the skills you need that we don't think about. And that's why I say you can't just say, I want to do telepractice to make extra money. I'm going to sit on my bed, put my computer up, and start Skyping, okay? There's a lot more to it than that. So let me close this down and pull my slide back up. So what technology? Well, first of all, before you even get anything, you need to decide what services you're trying to deliver. What services are you trying to deliver and who you're delivering them to? Like, I know if I'm going to do articulation, it works better if I have headsets and the child has headsets, because we can hear each other for those speech sounds like S, SH, Z that are very hard to hear. They can get lost in space, okay? If I'm working with children that have motor problem, I might want to consider using a computer that has a touch screen. That might be easier for them to use than a mouse. So I first need to decide who I'm delivering services to and what type of services. Who is my target population, the age of them, cognitive abilities, could they read or not read, how much needs to be in print, how much needs to be in picture. You know, if I'm coming back to symbol system, you know, how transparent does it need to be? If it needs to be very concrete, then how am I going to do that on the other end? So I need to think of that first. And then where will services be delivered? Do I need a system that's portable? Because I need to take it from room to room. Is it going to be left with them? You know, if it's going to be left with the family, I just have a security issue. Is it going to still be there when we need it next week? Because I've had families pawn stuff on me. PTs, I've gone and got out of a pawn shop a wheelchair that was a power wheelchair and it got pawned. And we went and got it from the pawn shop. So, I mean, this is the reality I have to think about, right? Because you're paying for it. So, you're going to need some hardware. Your hardware could either be a laptop, it could be an iPhone, it could be an iPad, or it could be some designated hardware, which is like what I have here in the far left, a system that was built specifically for video conferencing. Some things you need to think about is how well can my children use it, how easy is it to access, the portability of it, if I needed to move it around. You know, also the upkeep. A system like this one on the far left runs several $1,000s. I have a mini version down in a suite, and that ran me about $4,000 just for a screen on the wall and the system. So we could be talking thousands of dollars which need to be upkept, right? And they're going to have new software, and new things are going to come out. So as you're thinking about your hardware, what services are you providing, who are they being provided to, but also the upkeep and the mobility of it. You are going to also need to think about what software you're going to be using and what features you want in your software. So there are a variety of video conferencing programs out there, Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, that are all out there. You need to be thinking about, if I choose my software, what will it allow me to do? Will it allow me to have like a whiteboard so the child can draw on it while I draw on it? Will it allow me to show pictures? Will it allow the child to maybe make choices and click on their choice and respond to that? Or will it only allow us to just talk to each other like FaceTime? That's all FaceTime does. It only allows you to talk back and forth to each other. So as I'm looking at my software, I need to go, what do I need it to do? I also need to think about ease of use. How easy is it to log on, log off? What sort of support do I get? If I'm having problems with the software, does the company provide support for that? So software. I also need to think about peripheral devices. These are things that plug into your computer. They either plug in with a USB port or they plug in with a jack. So I need to be asking myself, do I need headphones? Do I need a microphone? Do I need, this is a pen mouse right here. So for my kids that have motor problems, I'd rather go with like a pen sort of thing than a traditional mouse. Do I need a document camera like you see in the bottom right so that I can put documents up for the child to see? Or if I need to write something out spontaneously, I have a way to do that. So what other plugins do I need based on the type of children I'm providing services to? And then I need to also think about bandwidth, okay, my connection. How am I going to connect, and do I have sufficient bandwidth? So I'm going to play a video. It's about a minute, and I think they do a really nice job of explaining bandwidth, what that actually means. Oops.
Like photographs or videos. It deals with your internet connection speed, or bandwidth. Bandwidth might sound like a scary technical term, so here's a simple explanation. This pipe represents how everything you view on the internet gets from your internet service provider to your personal computer. The faster your connection, the larger this pipe is. The balloons represent the pieces of content you wish to view from the internet. They're all different size. Some things on the internet are small enough that they fit through the pipe all at once. They seem to arrive quickly. Others take longer. If they're large enough that they can't fit through all at once, what happens? Well, they don't fail to come through. They actually stretch out like this. They will fit through, but it will take longer because the pipe is only so big. The larger the piece of content you wish to view, the longer it will take to be pulled through this pipe. It has to stretch out to fit the width of the pipe, hence bandwidth. What happens if you attempt to view several large files simultaneously? They all try to fit through, which stretches all of them out longer. This is why large pieces of content seem to take a while, especially if you try to access many at once. The web works this way for nearly every type of content, but there are a few exceptions. Since videos are one of the largest types of content on the internet, something called streaming was invented to deliver these files more effectively. Streaming makes the video files take this type of shape, allowing them to pass through the pipe smoothly, often leaving room for other things as well. And that's a simple explanation of file size and bandwidth.
Okay, yeah, bandwidth. So, you know, like not trying to bog you down techie, but if you're going to engage in this, I have to understand bandwidth. Because, as he said, video, right, that was the file that takes up the most. Well, what are we going to use to communicate with our client with? Video. And not only is it just going to be video of us, but then we're going to try to show pictures, or we're going to try to have the client write as we write something, so we're adding more and more to that. If I don't have sufficient bandwidth, if my tube isn't big enough, then that's going to impede my services. And all three of our organizations say telepractice needs to be equal to or better than in person. You can't just say, well, the child can't get anything, this is better than nothing. All three of our organizations said it needs to be as good as or better than in person. And if there's not enough bandwidth where that family or that child is at school to handle the video, then you just don't do it. Just don't engage, don't do it. I'm going out to a school on Monday out in Danville area. They do birth to 5 services, and they have a preschool program there. They start at 2. And we're having some problems because of bandwidth. You know, it's kind of out in rural. I'm worried about the building. I think the building is down in an industrial park. And so I think because of the buildings around there, that's going to be an issue. But we're having bandwidth issues. And if we can't get that solved, then we're going to have to stop services that way because it's not effective. So I have to know bandwidth. I also have to know how to figure that out before I enter in a contract. Like before I enter in a contract with a school, I would pull up their school and see if there is sufficient bandwidth, and I would talk to their IT person. Because now it becomes an ethical thing and I'm engaging in a contract with you. So you have to know things like bandwidth. Oops. I want to go on for a second. Let me go here. Based on the research, what we're finding is you need a minimum bandwidth of 384 kilobytes per second. Okay? Just worry about the 384. That kind of gives you a marker, the 384 for that. I also need to consider upload and download speeds. Upload is how quickly it goes to the internet. Download is how quickly it comes down. Those will be different speeds. So FYI, when you talk to them and they say, oh yeah, we have sufficient download speed, say, what about your upload? Because that's the kid in the school, their video uploading to get to you. So you need to look at upload and download speeds. You need to consider both of those. And then you also need to consider bandwidth management. What I mean by that is, have you noticed at different times in the day, if you're trying to stream something, it comes through very quickly and clearly, like if you're doing Netflix. If you're in the middle of the day, it's like a work day, but you've taken the day off or whatever, and they can stream real fast. Well, I mean, you know, it happens every now and again. Versus at night, when you're trying to download, we use Sling. We don't do cable. We use this online thing called Sling, and that's how we watch ESPN. And so everybody is on, right, watching to see Kentucky. So you know what happens sometimes to my connection? It starts lagging, right? And I'm screaming, no! You know, because they pause, right? Like, you know, like this. Well, bandwidth management is the management of how much data is coming through. That can affect your services because let's say you said, I'm going to deliver services to a child at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, what's everybody at that school doing at 8 o'clock in the morning, most likely? They're logging in, they're checking email, they're doing whatever. So a lot of people need to get through that little tube. So I can find if I don't understand how they manage their bandwidth, even with a family with a residential area, that can interfere. So some of the technology to be aware of is like with bandwidth. The other thing you're going to need technology-wise, your hardware, your software, peripheral, consider bandwidth, is also alternate forms of communication. All three of our licensure laws in the state of Kentucky make it very clear that you have to have alternate means of communicating with that client that are not just via video conferencing or whatever program. You have to have another way to touch base with them and for them to contact you. So we have a printer, scanner, faxer, all in one in the office. Think about telephone, cell phone, getting numbers, that type of thing. But you have to think about how else am I going to contact you? How will they contact me? And then you need to, as we're talking about all this, consider it from both ends. Not only what technology do I have at my end, but what technology do they have at the other end? If I'm working with a paraprofessional in a school, is there a phone in the room for her to use? You know, is she in a room where she has a phone? If there is a phone, did somebody even bother to give her my phone number so she could call me if we're not making a connection for that? If they needed to be able to fax some information to me, like an IEP, does that person have the capability to fax it to me? So it's not just on my end, but it's on the child's end. If it's a family and they need to get me some documents, most families don't have scanner faxers. I mean, I don't know about yours. We have a copier. We can scan, but we can't fax. So how am I going to get that from them? So I need to be thinking about this from both ends. All right, number 5, something totally new. I'm done with technology. Is I need to also take a look at that environment. Where is it going to be delivered? I need to consider the privacy of that child. You know, have it in a private location. I cannot be doing it. This is a friend of mine. She does stuff at the VA. And so some of her clients said, oh, I'll have you deliver therapy at McDonald's because I can get free Wi-Fi there. You know, and they said, we don't have Wi-Fi at the house, but I'll run up to the McDonald's and you can do it. And she's like, no, you can't. Because you cannot be sitting in the middle of McDonald's and I'm doing therapy with you. That violates HIPAA, right? She said, now if you want to sit in your car and roll up the windows and everything and you can get their Wi-Fi, that is something we could talk about. But you can't be out there. For families, that might translate to like EI saying, I'll go to the library and I'll use theirs. That could work if there's a private room, but you need to consider privacy. The other thing is consider it from your end. You can't set yourself up at the dining room table after school and have your kids coming back and forth. That violates HIPAA. Okay, so even on your end, how are you going to maintain privacy? The setting that you're using, will it accommodate your tele-equipment? Would it accommodate the child if they have any specific equipment that they need? Is the room big enough for that? Quality of your lighting. If it's too bright, I get a lot of shadows and glare on me. The picture I've given you here with windows, I would cover those windows. It's going to be too much light coming in. We're going to get too much glare and too many shadows, and the child won't be able to see me well. So I need to consider lighting. Wall colors and decorations can come in. The best wall colors are neutral colors like beige, soft gray, blue. colors can really distort the visual image. Also projecting where a child is seeing me and there's a whole bunch of stuff on the back, like a busy bulletin board, can be distracting. I even had a friend who said that a fan, she was having some problems with the video, and what they discovered is it was the fan going on. And the fan was hitting the light and kind of reflecting oddly, so it was throwing different shadows on the image, and it was hard to see. Mirrors, if you have a mirror behind you, it can reflect back. So you have to think about that environment and how it's set up. And then lastly, securing your technology. You know, how is it going to be secured? Who's going to be responsible for it? Is it going to be locked up? Is it going to be on a cart? If you're moving it from one place to another, how are you going to keep it? You know, we just need to keep mindful of that. Also, the placement of the equipment. The last thing I'll say is you need to see about video capture. Have you set the video camera up where you can see what you need from the child? If I'm doing speech therapy, I want to be able to see from like the neck up usually. Good visual in the face. OT and PT, you might have to play with that positioning to make sure you see the entire child. Regardless, guys, best practice says you always want to try to set up that camera so that you and your client can make eye contact. So I always try to keep my camera high so it replicates we're talking to each other. I'm not talking at you as I'm looking down like this and you never see my face. So I have to consider that with the camera. Again, mobility of the equipment, etc. Okay, number 6, privacy and security. This is your HIPAA. Okay, let me say right now, there is no software you can buy that is HIPAA compliant. Software is not HIPAA compliant. So you will see, like Zoom says, by the professional grade, we're HIPAA compliant, and we use Zoom here at UK. Skype now says we have a HIPAA compliant version you can buy. No software is HIPAA compliant. It's how you use the software that makes it HIPAA compliant. So I don't want you to get lulled into the sense that, oh, I bought this software, it said it was HIPAA compliant, I'm done. No software is HIPAA compliant. It's how you use it. So for example, if I record in Zoom, I have violated part of its HIPAA compliance. The software I use allows me to record a session. Well, that technically violates the HIPAA compliance on that. So I just have a family sign and say, I know it's being recorded. I know here's what's going to happen. Okay? Just like it could be HIPAA compliant, but you're sitting there in your dining room with your kids going back and forth behind you. Well, now you're out of compliance and it had nothing to do with the software, okay? So keep that in mind. HIPAA, high-tech, FERPA, all of those, no software is going to be compliant for you. It's how you use that software for that. Okay, along with privacy and security is you will always have somebody with the child. If that's in a school, it'll be an e-helper. If it's in the home, it'll be the family. So if you're using an e-helper, that could be like a paraprofessional, a teacher's aide, something like that. It could be an SLPA or some sort of PTA or OTA if y'all have the assistants. You need to make sure that they've been trained on how to manage the equipment, how to turn it on and start the session, how to use the mouse, etc. That's not the child's responsibility. If you're working with families, you need to train them on how to use it. So you need to think about that. How to manage student behavior. How are you going to manage it like the child who's the spitter? What are you going to do and how are they going to react? You know, are they going to run from the room or what? Bringing students to and from therapy. How are they going to collect them, bring them? And then how will they assist during therapy? What will be their role? So for example, we have a test in speech path, the preschool language scales, which is a language test. And part of that, depending on the age of the child, requires actual manipulatives, blocks, a bear, etc. I cannot put that in digital form and maintain the test validity. It has to be actual manipulatives. So what I have to do is get all my manipulatives to my teleprovider, my e-helper, so that she has a set. I need to train her on how to use those. So when I'm administering that part of the test online, she can bring up the right manipulatives. And she can be the one to help present them for me. I've trained her. I'm still giving the test, but she knows how to use them. The same would be for OT and PT. If you didn't want any assistance for that child, then you got to tell that teleprofessional there with you, don't help them stand up. Wait and see what happens, you know? So it's training them on what they can expect and how they're going to be a part of this. And then also training them on HIPAA and FERPA. So they realize that they cannot go and start talking at McDonald's about the kids they're working with, etc. And then lastly, my 7th thing I want to talk about here is client selection. You know, so as I said, in-person needs to be equal to telerehabilitation. They need to be equal. You need to consider physical and sensory characteristics. So if a child is blind, what are we going to do? And that's my next hurdle. I have a child in Jefferson, not Jefferson County, another county around, and I cannot wait to get my hands on that one. I'm very excited to see what we're going to do for a child with vision impairment and how we provide services for that. I don't worry that we can't. I'm just really excited to see how we will for that. But I need to keep that in mind for that. Also with physical and sensory characteristics, I need to think of if I'm working with a family. You know, do they have anything that might prevent them from helping the child use the technology? So it's not just from the child, but it's also who's going to be working with them. Cognitive, behavioral, and motivational characteristics. We're seeing really good compliance in the literature with kids with autism because they love the technology, and we're seeing some improved compliance rates there. But then you have to practice that right, but you still need in-person real-time engagement. So finding that balance there. Communication characteristics, if they're going to use assistive technology to communicate, then how am I going to set that up so I can read that as if we're having a conversation? And then child support resources. Who's there to help a family if their internet's not working? Who's there to help the family if their computer goes down? Or who's there at the school to help? So also what resources are there? So we have 7 things that you need to consider for it. Why you're going to use it, licensure, how you're going to get paid, what technology you use, what's your environment going to be for that, HIPAA and staying compliant there, and then also your client selection. Now, I'm going to skip. I was going to have us do a review. I'd like to just spend the last couple minutes and tell you some things we're doing here at UK, because we might be asking you for some assistance down the road. The first thing that we have, and Colleen referenced this earlier, is we got a grant last April from the U.S. Department of Education to train graduate students in CSD in the use of telepractice. We are very excited about this because we are one of only 2 programs in the whole country that offers specific training in the use of telepractice. The University of Maine is the other one. Right now, from what I am aware of from my colleagues in PT, there is no program in the country that explicitly trains physical therapists to use telerehabilitation. So we are very excited about this. Linking Kids to Speech-Language Pathologists is what it's called. It will train 40 of our students, 8 a year over the course of 5 years. So in May, we will graduate our first cohort who got explicit systematic training in this. They complete 2 3-credit didactic courses. So they learn all about the technology, how to use it, and then they get experience and practice using it, talking about with fluency, autism, AAC, etc. They also gain 30 hours of experience using it via 2 telepractice experiences. So right now my scholars are in the schools, and they're using it in the school setting to deliver services to a variety of different children. They also complete a 14-week externship in a rural school so they understand that culture and they understand the needs of that community. And then they'll get 2 years of mentorship upon graduation. So that's one thing we have as a way to move forth with telerehabilitation and do it in a very sophisticated manner that is best practice for the profession, and that's links. We also have completed a survey. I'm going to skip this in a second. But a colleague of mine and I, we surveyed all the special ed directors in Kentucky, and we just wanted to say, what's the state of telepractice here in Kentucky? Are people using it or not? We got a really good response rate. 87 directors, so 54% responded, and we had them from across the state. Northern Kentucky, Eastern, Western Kentucky for that. And so what we found is that one school district was currently using Telepractice as a way to address shortages. Another one had used it and was no longer using it. So it has been used in the state. What we didn't see is that sped ed directors were seeing it as a way to address vacancies. In fact, we had several school districts who said this is a reoccurring problem. We can never get a therapist. But they had never considered using telerehabilitation as a way to fill that gap. Primary barrier to adoption was concerns regarding its validity. They all said we have the technology. They all said we have the personnel trained in it, which kind of made me go, you know. But what we don't think is that it's valid. They said we as a school board don't think it's valid, and the community doesn't think it's valid. And I thought that was very interesting because it says to me and to y'all, we've got to educate. They're not going to adopt if they don't think that this works. And so we're talking about how we could do that. And then some non-barriers, again, they thought they had trained personnel, they thought they had sufficient technology, and then there was some interest in collaborating. So we are seeing this be used in Kentucky. My final one I'm going to show you that's going on, and in fact that scholar is here today, and if you want to talk to her later, you can. I have a master's student who's conducting a study looking at the inter-rater reliability of 3 tests administered in an online format versus face-to-face. So we're using 3 tests that are used very common within speech and language for qualification, and we're seeing if the score is equal. Because evaluation is part of this, and if you don't get the same results as in person, then we can't evaluate for that. So we're wrapping that study up now. What we're finding is with the PPVT, picture vocabulary test, so I show you 4 pictures, you point to the one I named, we're getting really good reliability. The in-person score and the person online is saying yeah. The EVT, which is an expressive test, that's my timer saying I'm out of time.